Lungile dragged her tired feet through the noisy streets of Ezulwini, dreaming of a warm bath and a few hours of quiet. She had spent the whole day at the textile factory, stitching clothes for people who would never know her name. All she wanted was to rest, but when she pushed open the door to her small room, her breath caught in her throat. The space was completely bare. The bed she slept on, her clothes, her notebooks, even the tiny envelope where she kept her hard-earned money, everything had disappeared. It looked as if her life had been swept away in a single moment. Her heart started racing. She stepped inside slowly, hoping she was imagining things. She opened the cupboard, it was empty. She checked under the window, nothing. Panic rose in her chest. She ran to Motivational, the landlord, her voice shaking as she asked what had happened. Instead of comfort, she received cold eyes and a sharp tongue. Motivational told her she had not paid her rent, and claimed she had every right to take Lungile's belongings. Lungile stood frozen, shock spreading through her like ice. She remembered clearly handing over the rent earlier that month. She had even counted the notes twice before giving them to the landlord. She tried to explain, but the landlord dismissed her with a wave, acting as if Lungile's words meant nothing. That final dismissal hit her harder than the loss of her things. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. All her months of saving, every long shift, every sacrificed meal, gone in one cruel moment. She felt small, powerless, as if the city she worked so hard to survive in had turned its back on her. Lungile sank onto the dusty floor outside the room, her body shaking from the weight of it all. She had no bed to sleep on, no clothes except the ones she wore, no proof of the money she had given. The world around her kept moving. People laughed, cars passed, children played, but everything inside her felt broken. She wondered how someone could take advantage of her kindness and hard work so easily. Yet even in her pain, something inside her refused to give up. The betrayal hurt deeply, but a quiet strength pushed through her tears. She wiped her face and took a slow breath, knowing she had to stand up again, even if she had to start from nothing. Lungile spent the long night sitting on a cold bench behind the bus station, hugging herself tightly as the wind cut through her thin work uniform. She had nowhere else to go, and the empty streets made her feel even more alone. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of her empty room returned, making her chest ache all over again. She tried to stay strong, but the darkness felt heavy, and the cold made her whole body shake. She wondered how her life had changed so quickly in just a few hours. As the early morning light began to appear, she noticed an elderly woman slowly settling beside the bench. Her clothes were old, her blanket torn, and her face showed the marks of many hard years. The woman looked at Lungile with gentle eyes and introduced herself as Tandime. Lungile could barely speak, still shocked and exhausted from the night, but she nodded politely. Tandime pulled out a small piece of bread wrapped in paper. It was not much, just a small portion she had saved for herself, but she broke it in half and quietly placed one piece in Lungile's hand. Lungile stared at it, surprised that someone who had almost nothing was choosing to share with her. Her throat tightened as she whispered a thank you. As she ate the bread, she felt warmth rise in her heart. She had thought she was at her lowest, but here was someone who had lived through harsh days and still chose kindness. That simple gesture touched something deep inside her. She realized she still had her body, her ability to work, and the courage to keep moving. She had lost many things, but she was not completely defeated. The world had taken from her, yet here, in the most unexpected place, someone gave her a reason to believe again. Lungile looked at Tandai with gratitude shining in her eyes. For the first time since everything went wrong, she felt a spark of hope. It was small, but it was real. She understood that as long as she could still breathe, she had a chance to rise again. The cold bench, the hard night, the tears, they had not broken her. Instead, they opened her eyes to the quiet strength she carried inside. She promised herself she would not stop fighting for her life, no matter how difficult the path became. Lungile followed Nomvolo and Sabello through the narrow hallway of the workers' hostel, unsure of what to expect. When they opened the door to their tiny room, she saw two small mattresses pushed against the wall, a single chair, and a few bags stacked in the corner. There was almost no space left, yet both of them smiled warmly and told her she could stay with them until she found her feet again. Their kindness made her eyes sting. After everything she had lost, Having two strangers open their hearts to her felt like a light she desperately needed. She laid her borrowed blanket on the floor, grateful just to have a roof over her head. The next morning, she woke up before dawn and headed straight to the factory. She asked for extra shifts, even the hardest ones that most people avoided. She stood for long hours folding, stitching, carrying heavy rolls of fabric, pushing her body far past her usual limits. Every time she felt tired, she reminded herself that she was working for her future. She wanted to build something stable, something no one could take away from her again. Her hands ached, her back burned. But she kept going. She saved every coin she earned, refusing to spend even on small comforts. She packed leftover food, skipped bus rides when she could walk, and wrote down every bit of money she managed to keep. Each night, she returned to the little room and found Nomvolo and Sibello chatting softly or fixing their lunchboxes. They never made her feel like a burden. They shared their jokes, listened to her stories, and encouraged her whenever she felt overwhelmed. Their friendship reminded her that there were still good people in the world, people who cared without expecting anything in return. Their support gave her strength on days when her legs trembled from exhaustion. As days turned into weeks, Lungile felt something shift inside her. The fear that once controlled her began to fade. She no longer saw herself as someone broken. She saw a woman fighting for her future with everything she had. She kept a quiet promise in her heart. She would never allow herself to depend on anyone again. She would climb out of this struggle with her own effort, step by step. No matter how slow the progress, she believed she would rise again, stronger and wiser than before. Lungile heard about a free community workshop from one of the factory workers during a lunch break. At first, she did not think much of it, but something pushed her to go and see it after her shift. When she stepped inside the small classroom, she saw sewing machines lined up, bright fabrics stacked on shelves, and a group of eager learners practicing different stitches. The room felt warm and full of hope. She sat quietly at the back, unsure if she belonged there, but the moment she touched the fabric and began sewing, something inside her came alive. Her hands moved quickly and smoothly, almost as if they had been waiting for this chance. The instructor, Bull, watched her from across the room, noticing how neatly her lines formed and how confidently she worked. After the class, Bull walked over to her with a kind smile and introduced herself. She told Lungile that she had real skill, the kind that could grow into something big if she stayed focused. Hearing those words made Lungile's heart race. No one had ever looked at her work with such respect before. She felt a spark of excitement, as if the door to a new world had opened in front of her. She started attending the workshop every evening after her long factory shifts. Even when she was tired, she pushed herself to learn new techniques, shaping patterns, choosing colors, and creating clean finishes. Her confidence grew each day. Soon, she began designing simple pieces like skirts, tops, and head wraps. Her style was clean and graceful, and people in the workshop admired her creativity. One afternoon, a local vendor visited the class looking for someone who could make affordable outfits for her stall. Bull immediately pointed to Lungile. That first order changed everything. Lungile worked late into the night on the small borrowed sewing machine, making sure every piece looked perfect. When she delivered the outfits to the vendor, the woman was amazed at the quality and paid her right away. Holding that money felt different from her factory wages. It was the result of her own ideas and her own hands. Soon, more vendors began asking for her designs. Her skills were being noticed, and for the first time in a long while, she felt proud of herself. Each new order showed her that she was stepping into a future she never imagined she could reach. Lungile's small business began to grow faster than she expected. At first, she only made a few pieces for a vendor, but soon word started spreading around Ezulwini. Women who saw her designs on the street started asking where the outfits came from. Some followed the vendor back to the workshop just to find her. One woman wanted a dress for her sister's wedding, another needed something special for church, and others simply wanted to feel beautiful in something handmade. Each request brought new energy to Lungile's days. She worked with excitement, choosing bright fabrics and shaping them into outfits that made people smile. She loved seeing the joy on their faces when they tried on her clothes. As more people came looking for her designs, she realized she needed her own space to work properly. After months of saving every little bit she earned, she finally found a small room she could afford. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, and she signed the papers with trembling hands. Walking into that space for the first time felt like stepping into a new beginning. She looked around the empty room and remembered the painful night she spent on the cold bench. That memory made this moment feel even more powerful. She had built her future with her effort, not depending on anyone to save her. She bought a bed first, placing it carefully in the corner. Then she saved more and added a sewing machine that she had dreamed about for months. Next came a simple wooden table, where she could cut fabrics and sketch new ideas. Every item she brought into the room felt like a victory. The space slowly turned into a home, not just a place to sleep, but a place filled with purpose and pride. She even hung a small cloth she designed herself on the wall, a reminder of how far she had come. Each morning, she woke up ready to create something new. Women kept knocking on her door, excited to wear her elegant work at celebrations and family events. Some came with friends, turning her tiny room into a lively place full of laughter and conversation. Lungile no longer felt the fear she once carried. Instead, she felt strong, steady, and hopeful. Her life, once broken apart, was whole again because she refused to give up. Every stitch she made pulled her closer to a future she truly deserved. News began spreading around Ezulwini that several tenants had come forward claiming their things had vanished from their rooms. People started sharing their stories, and every detail pointed to the same person. Soon, everyone realized that Motivational, the same landlord who had taken everything from Lungile, had been doing the same thing to others. The truth could no longer be hidden. Tenants gathered together, angry and tired of being mistreated, and they reported her actions to the community leaders. When Lungile heard about it, she felt a quiet shock, not because she didn't expect it, but because she finally saw that she had not been the only victim. One afternoon, a community officer visited her sewing room and explained that she had been requested to give a statement. At first, Lungile felt her heart grow heavy. She remembered the pain of losing all her belongings and the cold night she had spent outside. But when she walked into the meeting hall and saw the other tenants sharing their hurt, something inside her shifted. She spoke calmly, describing what happened, but without bitterness. Her voice carried strength, not anger. While the crowd waited for her reaction, she surprised everyone. Instead of demanding punishment or shouting in rage, she shared how that difficult moment had pushed her into a new chapter of her life. She talked about the friends who had sheltered her when she was lost. She talked about discovering the workshop where she learned to design clothes. She talked about selling her work to women around the city and building a small but strong business with her own hands. Her words were soft but powerful, showing that she refused to let pain make her bitter. The community leaders listened carefully and decided that Motivational had to return every item she had taken or pay full compensation to all the people she had wronged. She was also ordered to stand before everyone and apologize for her actions. When she finally did, her voice trembled, and she could not look anyone in the eye. Lungile watched her without hatred. She felt no desire for revenge, only a deep understanding of how far she had come. As she walked back to her sewing room that evening, she felt light. She knew her success was not built on comfort but on courage. What once felt like the end of her world had become the beginning of a future brighter than anything she imagined. Lungile finally stepped into her dream, opening a small tailoring studio called Imbokodo Designs, a name she chose carefully because it meant the rock. She wanted her business to symbolize strength, resilience, and the ability to stand firm no matter what life threw at her. The studio was cozy, with bright sunlight streaming through the windows, sewing machines lined neatly, and colorful fabrics stacked on shelves. It was small, but every corner spoke of her effort, patience, and determination. The sign outside proudly announced her presence, and she felt a quiet pride as she imagined the women of Ezulwini coming in to wear her creations. One of the first people she invited to work with her was Tailoring, the elderly woman who had shared half of her bread with Lungile on the cold night behind the bus station. She had never forgotten that act of kindness, and now she wanted to repay it by offering Tailoring a steady role in her studio. Tailoring's hands were steady and skilled, and her cheerful stories filled the room with warmth. Every stitch they made together felt like a celebration of survival, hope, and friendship. Customers arrived, drawn by the reputation Lungile had built through her hard work and the elegance of her designs. They admired the care in each outfit, and word spread quickly about the young woman who had risen from nothing to create beauty for her community. When her first paycheck arrived, Lungile did something she had never forgotten in her hardest moments. She gave back. She visited local schools and bought uniforms for children whose families could not afford them. Seeing their faces light up filled her with a joy she could hardly describe. She realized that her struggles had not only shaped her, but had given her the power to help others. That first act of giving became a promise she made to herself. Every success she earned would touch someone else's life in a meaningful way. As she stood in her studio that evening, surrounded by fabrics, laughter, and the hum of sewing machines, she whispered to herself, feeling a swell of gratitude and triumph. Life emptied my room, but it filled my heart with everything I once prayed for. Every hardship, every tear, and every night of fear had led her to this moment. A life built on courage, talent, and the kindness of strangers who became family. Lungile knew that no challenge could ever take away what she had created from her heart. If you loved Lungile's journey, don't forget to like and share this story. Subscribe to our channel for more amazing African folktales every day.